All right, you beautiful bastards. Hold on to your goddamn meat horns. We're diving headfirst into the world of the Normans, those Viking descendant asshats who root through Europe like a theft-bomb tornado, leaving a trail of castles, conquests, enough cultural chaos to make your head spin.
And you know how much we love a good dose of historical mayhem. Let's cut the crap. Most people picture William the Conqueror and that whole Battle of Hastings thing.
Okay.
Right. But the Norman story is way bigger than some stuffy English king.
F-bomb, right? We're talking Italy, Sicily,
Yeah.
Ireland. Hell, these guys even showed up in goddamn Jerusalem. They were everywhere. And they weren't afraid to crack some skulls along the way. So let's unpack this shit. How the hell did they go from pillaging pagan raiders to French-speaking church-going conquerors? Seems like one hell of a makeover.
It's a wild F-bomb ride, that's for sure. It all starts back in the 9th and 10th centuries with those Viking raids everyone's heard about. But here's the thing. It wasn't all just smash and grab. These Vikings started settling down, digging their heels, and, getting busy with the locals. Next thing you know, their kids are speaking more French than F-bomb Norse.
Hold up. So they basically F-bombed their way into a whole new culture. Talk about a cultural clusterfuck.
Exactly. It was this crazy blend of Viking ferocity and French, let's call it sophistication. And that's where the Normans really start to take shape. They weren't just barbarians anymore. They were something new, something dangerous.
So how did they go from blending in to conquering everything in sight?
We'll take Rollo, for example. This Viking badass basically shows up on the French coast in 9/11 and says, look, you either give me a chunk of your land or I'm going to keep raiding the shit out of your coast. And the French king, being kind of a pushover, says, okay, fine, take this chunk of land, just F-bomb off and leave us alone.
No shit. They just handed over a piece of France like it was nothing.
Well, it wasn't quite that simple. Rollo agreed to convert to Christianity, become a vassal of the king, and defend the territory from other Viking raiders. It was a strategic move on both sides. The French got some peace and quiet, and Rollo got a F-bomb duchy to call his own. That land became Normandy, the birthplace of the Norman war machine.
Damn, Rollo was playing 4D chess while everyone else was stuck with checkers. Yes. So these Frenchified Vikings, they were still packing some serious Viking heat.
Oh, absolutely. They were still warriors at heart. But now they had a taste of power, ambition, and let's not forget French military strategy. They were learning how to fight smarter, not just harder.
They were like Vikings 2.0.
Yeah.
Same great taste. Less mindless pillaging.
Something like that. They combined the Viking berserker rage with French organization and cunning. And that, my friend, is a recipe for world domination.
Let's talk conquests then.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone knows about William the Conqueror stomping all over England in 1056, but what about their other greatest hits? Where else did these asshats plant their flag?
Oh man, where do we even start? They tore through southern Italy and Sicily like it was nobody's business. This one badass, Robert Guiscard, another descendant of Rollo, by the way, snatched these prime pieces of Mediterranean real estate from the Byzantines and the Muslims. We're talking serious power moves here. It shows that their ambition went way beyond just conquering some rainy island up north.
Damn, Guiscard sounds like he could conquer a F-bomb continent before breakfast. But how the hell did they hold on to all this territory? Were they just that damn good at fighting?
They were damn good fighters, no doubt. But there's more to it than that. They knew how to adapt, integrate, and build lasting structures.
Hold up. Are you telling me these guys actually gave a shit about culture? They weren't just burning and pillaging everything in sight.
They did their fair share of that, don't get me wrong. But they also understood that to rule effectively, you need more than just brute force. They knew how to win hearts and minds, or at least how to intimidate the F-bomb out of people. We're talking castles, laws, art language. They left their mark on everything. Think about those iconic medieval castles you see in movies and documentaries, the ones that make modern architecture look like a pile of F-bomb Legos.
Yeah, those epic stone fortresses that scream, "We're here to stay, bitches."
Exactly. The Normans brought that architectural badassery to Britain and beyond. They were masters of projecting power through stone and mortar.
So not just warriors, but builders and architects, too. These guys were a goddamn Renaissance fair waiting to happen. Anything else they were surprisingly good at.
Don't forget their legal system. They were obsessed with establishing order codifying laws and setting up courts. And get this, their legal system is still the basis for law in the Channel Islands today. Talk about a lasting F-bomb legacy.
Wait, so some random islands off the coast of France are still rocking a legal system from the freaking 11th century. That's some next level shit right there.
It really is. It shows how deeply the Normans embedded themselves in the places they conquered. They weren't just interested in grabbing loot and running. They wanted to build lasting institutions and reshape the very fabric of society. They were playing the long game.
So let's say you had a time machine, and you could go back and face these Normans. Would you rather meet them on the battlefield or try to outsmart them in court?
Honestly, I wouldn't want to F-bomb with them in either scenario. But their legal minds were sharp as hell. They knew how to use law as a weapon, just as effectively as a sword.
All right, let's zoom out a bit and look beyond Europe for a second. We're talking Crusades, Byzantine emperors, even popping up in Armenia and the Canary Islands. Seriously, these guys got around like a bunch of medieval rock stars.
They really did. It's mind-blowing to think about these Viking descendants fighting for Jerusalem. Talk about culture shock.
Hold up, we're fighting for a religion. We haven't even figured out this whole Christianity thing yet. Can we pillage some infidels first?
It makes you wonder what the hell motivated them to travel so far and risk their necks for such a foreign cause. Were they true believers? Or just looking for a good fight and some sweet, sweet loot? We might never know for sure.
But here's where it gets even more fifth-bombed up. They even had their own little kingdom in Antioch. Remember Bohemond? That guy we talked about earlier?
Yeah.
The one who basically said, screw you guys, I'm taking this piece of the Holy Land for myself.
Right. Bohemond of Toronto, son of Robert Guiscard. He was a cunning bastard. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Right. He was a major player in the First Crusade, helped capture Antioch, and then basically carved out his own little slice of the Crusader states.
So they were religious warriors, land-grabbing tycoons, and legal scholars all rolled into one. These guys were the ultimate medieval multitaskers.
Pretty much. And don't forget their impact on language. Old Norman, that crazy mix of French and Old Norse, had a huge influence on both English and French. Some of the words we use today have roots in that Viking gibberish, thanks to the Normans.
Hold on. Are you telling me that some of the words I'm using right now are actually from those axe-wielding maniacs?
Absolutely. It's another example of how these so-called barbarians actually enriched the cultures they conquered. They weren't just about destruction. They were about leaving their F-bomb mark on the world, for better or worse.
Damn, I'm starting to think we've been giving the Normans a bad rap all these years. Maybe they weren't so bad after all.
Well, bad is a matter of perspective, isn't it? They were definitely ruthless and ambitious as hell,
Right.
but they were also incredibly adaptable, organized, and influential. You gotta give them credit for that.
That's a pretty nuanced take for a bunch of dudes who love to swing axes and crack skulls.
Yeah.
What do you think motivated them to travel so far and fight for so much? Were they just bored?
Yeah.
Or were they driven by something deeper?
It was probably a mix of ambition, religious zeal, a thirst for adventure, and maybe even a touch of boredom. Who knows? But what's truly fascinating is how their legacy still echoes through history.
Okay, so spill the tea. How exactly did they manage to leave such a lasting impact? I mean, besides those badass castles, of course.
Think about the English language, the legal systems of the Channel Islands, the art and architecture they left behind. They didn't just conquer, they created. They shaped the world in their own image.
Damn, that's some deep shit right there. They really were cultural chameleons. Yeah. Blending in, taking over, and leaving their mark wherever they went. They were like the F-bomb Kardashians of the medieval world. Yeah. Everyone knew their name, and everyone was talking about them, whether they liked it or not.
Exactly. They were masters of adaptation, which is probably the key to their success. They knew how to play the game, and they played it hard.
All right. That's a wrap for part 1 of our Norman deep dive. We've covered their Viking origins, their surprising transformation into French-speaking Christians, and their F-bomb epic conquests across Europe. But there's so much more to uncover.
We've only just scratched the surface. In part 2, we'll delve deeper into their cultural impact, their complex and often messed up relationship with the church, and the lasting legacy they left behind.
So grab another drink, take a piss break, and get ready for more Norman shenanigans. We'll be right back to unpack even more of this historical clusterfuck.
Welcome back, you magnificent F-bombs.
All right, so last time we were talking about how these Viking 2.0s basically conquered half of Europe. But it wasn't all just about kicking ass and taking names. They also built shit, made laws, and even dabbled in the arts. They were like the Renaissance fair before there even was such a thing.
Exactly. They had this weird mix of brutality and refinement, but let's not forget their relationship with the church. That's where things get really F-bomb interesting and honestly a bit fucked up.
Okay, so they went from pagan raiders worshiping Odin and Thor to devout Christians praising Jesus. It's a hell of a conversion story. But I'm guessing it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. What did the church think of these badass, battle-hardened Normans?
Well, imagine you're the Pope used to dealing with pious monks and all that holy shit, and suddenly these rough-and-tumble Normans show up, still dripping with Viking blood. And talking about their conquests, it must have been a real head-scratcher for the church.
So the Pope was probably like, who the hell let these barbarians in?
Yeah, probably something like that. But here's the thing. The Normans were smart as hell. They knew that having the church on their side was a major power move. It gave them legitimacy influence and a whole lot of spiritual brownie points.
So they basically played nice to get what they wanted. Classic power move.
Exactly. They donated land, built monasteries, funded religious orders, and even went on those crazy-ass crusades we talked about. It was all about showing the church that they were serious about this whole Christianity thing and that they were a force to be reckoned with.
Speaking of crusades, wasn't there some Norman dude who basically started his own kingdom in the Middle East during all that religious mayhem?
You're talking about Beaumont de Toronto, son of our old friend Robert Guiscard. This guy was a major player in the First Crusade, helped capture the city of Antioch, and then basically decided, screw it, I'm keeping this place for myself. Talk about balls of steel.
So the church was probably a little pissed off about that.
Right.
Yeah.
They were supposed to be liberating the Holy Land for Christendom, not carving out personal empires. They weren't thrilled, to say the least. But Bohemond knew how to play the game. He swore allegiance to the Byzantine emperor, but let's be real, he was out for himself, he had his own ambitions, and he wasn't afraid to piss off a few bishops to get what he wanted.
Sounds like a recipe for conflict, which I'm guessing is exactly what happened.
Oh, there was conflict aplenty. The Normans in the East were constantly clashing with the Byzantines, the Muslims, and even other Crusader states. It was a chaotic, violent, and utterly F-bombed up time. But hey, that's kind of what the Normans thrived on. They were like sharks in bloody water.
It's like their Viking instincts never really went away. They just traded their long ships for horses and their horn helmets for Crusader crosses. Deep down, they were still those bloodthirsty bastards who loved a good fight.
That's a pretty accurate assessment. But here's what's fascinating to me. They managed to blend this warrior spirit with a genuine, albeit sometimes convenient, respect for the church. It's this weird contradiction that makes them so damn compelling. They were devout yet ruthless, pious yet power-hungry. They were a walking paradox, and it somehow worked for them.
Okay, so let's talk about their cultural legacy. What did they leave behind besides those badass castles that the Channel Islands legal system? What kind of mark did they make on the world beyond just conquering shit?
Their impact on language was massive. Remember Old Norman, that crazy mix of French and Old Norse we talked about? Well, it eventually evolved into Anglo-Norman, which became the language of the English court for centuries after the Norman conquest. So yeah, those F-bomb Vikings influenced the way English is spoken today.
So you're telling me that some of the words I'm using right now are actually from those axe-wielding, mead-guzzling barbarians? That's some mind-blowing shit.
Absolutely. Think about words like war, castle, husband, even berserk. They all have roots in Old Norse, which made its way into English through the Norman invasion. It's a reminder that language is constantly evolving, influenced by conquests, migrations, and all sorts of cultural exchanges.
Damn, those barbarians were more sophisticated than we give them credit for. They weren't just about destroying cultures. They were about absorbing them, twisting them, and making them their own.
Exactly. And it wasn't just language. They influenced English law, literature, art, even cuisine. Think about the whole concept of chivalry and knighthood that's heavily influenced by Norman ideals and their romanticized view of warfare.
So those romantic notions of knights in shining armor, rescuing damsels in distress and fighting for honor and glory, we can thank the Normans for that. I always thought that shit was more of a King Arthur thing.
It's a mix of influences, for sure.
Yeah.
But the Normans definitely played a role in shaping those ideals and popularizing them throughout Europe. And let's not forget their impact on art and architecture. The Romanesque style they brought to England is stunning. Think about Durham Cathedral, one of the most magnificent buildings in the world. That's a Norman masterpiece, a testament to their architectural genius.
All right, so they were warriors, builders, lawmakers, patrons of the arts. Is there anything these guys couldn't do? They were like the F-bomb Beyonce of the medieval world. Talented, ambitious, and always in control.
Well, they weren't exactly known for their humility. They were arrogant, power-hungry, and often brutal in their pursuit of domination. But hey, nobody's perfect, right?
True that. You can't have it all, I guess. So what does this all mean? What's the big takeaway about the Normans? What should we remember about these complicated, badass, and often totally messed up bastards?
They were a force of nature, a whirlwind of change that swept through Europe and left an indelible mark on history. They were brutal, ambitious, but also adaptable and creative. And their legacy lives on, woven into the fabric of our language's laws and even our collective imagination.
It's like a what-if scenario in history, isn't it? What if Rollo hadn't decided to roll the dice and grab that piece of France back in 9/11? Yeah. How different would the world be today? Would we even be having this conversation right now?
It's impossible to say for sure, but their impact was undeniable. They were a product of their time, a unique blend of Viking ferocity and French ambition that reshaped the political and cultural landscape of Europe. They were the ultimate disruptors, and they left the world a very different place than they found it.
Damn, that's some heavy shit to ponder. All right, I need a break. My brain is full of Normans, and I need a F-bomb beer. We'll be back with part 3, where we'll explore the darker side of their legacy and why they ultimately faded from power.
Don't miss it. We'll be diving into some juicy scandals, betrayals, and maybe even a few curses. Stay tuned, you beautiful bastards.
Are you filthy animals? Are you ready for the final round of our Norman beatdown? We've covered their epic rise, their badass conquests, their surprising cultural contributions. But let's get real for a sec. No empire lasts forever. So what brought these magnificent bastards down? What chink in their armor finally did them in?
Well, their ambition was a double-edged sword. Remember those clashes with the church we talked about? That tension never really went away. They were always pushing boundaries, testing limits, and eventually, that shit catches up to you.
Yeah, those Normans weren't exactly known for kissing the Pope's ring. So did the church finally get fed up and excommunicate their asses?
Not quite. But there were definitely power struggles. The Normans were constantly trying to expand their influence, secular and religious, and that led to some serious friction with the church, as well as with other powerful rulers who were getting sick of their shit.
So it's like a medieval Game of Thrones, with everyone scheming and backstabbing to get ahead.
Exactly. Alliances were constantly shifting. Betrayals were as common as a F-bomb head cold, and everyone was vying for power. And let's not forget about those internal squabbles. The Normans were notorious for fighting amongst themselves. Family feuds, succession crises, backstabbing cousins, you name it, they had it.
Classic family drama, eh?
So
which Norman fuck-up led to their ultimate downfall? Give me the juicy details.
it wasn't one single fuck-up, more like a slow burn. Take England, for example. By the 12th century, the Norman kings were spending more time on the continent fighting over their French territories than they were actually ruling England. They were trying to juggle too many balls. And eventually, some of them were bound to drop.
So they spread themselves too thin. Classic case of an empire overreaching.
You got it. And while they were busy fighting on the continent, resentment was brewing back in England. The Anglo-Saxon population had never fully accepted Norman rule, and they were just waiting for a chance to stick it to the man.
So did those Anglo-Saxons finally rise up and kick those Norman asses back across the channel?
Not exactly a full-on revolt. But the power dynamic started to shift. The Norman kings eventually lost control of Normandy in the 13th century, which seriously weakened their grip on England. It's hard to rule an island kingdom when you're constantly looking over your shoulder, worried about getting invaded from your own goddamn homeland.
Damn, losing their home base was a major blow.
Yeah.
What about their other conquests? What happened to those F-bomb empires they built?
The Kingdom of Sicily hung on for a while, but eventually crumbled due to internal strife and pressure from outside forces. Those Normans in the east also lost their grip on power. Their little crusader kingdom swallowed up by rivals who were hungrier for land and glory.
So basically the Norman Empire went out with a whimper, not a bang. Not exactly a glorious ending for these once mighty conquerors.
True, but you can't erase history. Their impact is undeniable. They left behind a legacy of castles laws language and a certain swagger that still resonates today. They were a force to be reckoned with, and their story is a reminder that even the most powerful empires eventually crumble.
All right, so let's wrap this shit up. What's the big takeaway from this Norman deep dive? What should we remember about these complicated, badass motherfuckers?
They were disruptors, they shook things up, challenged the status quo, and left the world a very different place than they found it. They were a reminder that history is full of surprises, and that sometimes the most unlikely characters end up shaping the course of events. They were a force of nature, a goddamn hurricane that ripped through Europe and left a lasting mark on the world.
Damn, that's some deep shit. All right, you beautiful bastards. That's the end of our Norman adventure. We've covered their rise, their conquest, their culture, and their eventual fall. We've laughed. We've learned. We've probably dropped a few F-bombs along the way. But most importantly, we've gained a deeper understanding of these fascinating and often totally messed up historical figures. So go out there, slurp some shit, and try not to conquer any countries.
All right.
All right.